Okay, if I could have everyone's attention, we need to get started. We have quite a few guests here today, as you can tell, including a film crew, which is something we've never had before in the history of South Valley District, South Main, as far as I know. So, we're going to start with a training, but before, feel free to sit down for a minute.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
I don't want to have you stand there for.
All right.
We'll have you turn it over to you in just a couple minutes.
Perfect.
But Trisha's here. She's part of Terry's team's training today, and I'll let Terry introduce her when we get to that point. But before we start, I wanted to have Michelle kind of explain what's going on and why we have a film crew here today.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for accommodating us and letting us crash your meeting. We are here doing a project with the National Consortium of Interpreter Education Training Centers, and they've received grant funding to do specific filming for vocational rehabilitation interpreting, which is a great opportunity. There's been 3 states selected, in Minnesota, ourselves, and Boston, so we're fortunate to be a part of this project. And what we're doing is we're taking a lot of different samples about what happens in vocational rehabilitation. So staff meetings such as this today, and we specifically had these dates for filming, so that's why you're lucky enough to have us here at your meeting today, because we're like, great, we wanted authentic stuff, so this is a real deal meeting that we just wanted to get what we really have. We've done one-on-one appointments, we've had stuff with job coaches and choose to work trainers, and we have some stuff with vocational evaluation this afternoon and so forth. So we've got a lot of good samples. And what's going to be happening is they'll take these, the footage that we have, and they'll make a DVD set that will then go out nationally to interpreter education for education purposes for VR interpreting. Because it's kind of a specialized field, as you know, the work that you do is very unique, and so the interpreting of the work that you do is also very unique. So again, we appreciate you accommodating us. And we're just going to be here for the first presentation, for Trisha's presentation, and then we will quickly get our stuff and be leaving, so for the duration. So we have some releases of information, or release forms, if you happen to be on camera. We're not going to be spanning the room as Doug is going to. He's not going to be spanning the room, but if you happen to be on camera or something like that, we might send a release form to you back just to have you sign so that we have that for our documentation purposes.
Great.
So thanks, Kim, and we appreciate you guys again for accommodating us.
Sure, thanks for being here. So now you know what's going on. So you probably won't be on camera, but if you want to, you can always try to get on camera.
It's the changes we're doing.
Before we start, I want to make sure we don't forget to do our customer service award. We do this once a month, and people can nominate each other for good customer service, and then the winner gets prime parking out front. So, Kyle, would you do the honors? You usually do when you're here. So.
That sounds good. Want me to read it too?
Sure.
Thanks. Tom Smith. Seeing a client with minimal notice to expedite services in the best interest of the client.
Great.
Nice job.
Welcome back, Tom, by the way. He's a newly married man. So.
Yeah, I know, really.
All right. I'm going to turn the time over to Terry's team then.
Okay, now for some reason Jeff has not been able to dial in.
I can try to see if I can get him.
And he was going to do the introduction, but I have it here since I gave it to him. So I'm going to introduce Tricia. She's will give a short presentation. We'll have some question and answering session, and Tom's going to guide that. Fernando will talk a little bit about his role as he's our liaison for DSPD, and then I'll just do kind of a closure at the end of that. So we welcome Tricia. We're very glad to have her here. Tricia has worked for the Division of Services for People with Disabilities for nearly 12 years. She has been funded through the Medicaid Infrastructure Grant since 2008 and has had the opportunity to focus on and research what is happening nationally around employment and people who experience the most significant disabilities. Tricia is the program administrator for the House Bill 45 Support Work Independence Program with DSPD and is representing DSPD in the Employment First Priority legislation, which identifies DSPD, VR, DWS to prioritize employment for people with disabilities within service delivery. Outside of work, she does have a life outside of work.
It's true.
Tricia enjoys cooking, reading, and spending time with her family, including 3 crazy dogs.
It's true.
So welcome, Tricia.
Thank you. Now that I'm sitting, I don't want to stand up. Is that okay? All right. Thank you for the introduction. Again, I'm going to talk quickly about the House Bill 45 program, Support Work Independence. Kyle is my counterpart and on top of all the other things that he does with VR. So I happily tend to make the copies and kind of get stuff ready because the fact that he's here sometimes is a miracle in my mind because of how busy he is. I decided not to put the PowerPoint up, so if you could just have all of the slides that I'm going to talk about in your packet. And while you're opening your packet, you have several handouts that you can refer to later. You've got the PowerPoint, and then you've also got the flyer, the little colorful flyer. That's something that we are distributing to potential participants. So they're getting sent that letter. I'm going to agency fairs and using this flyer. So it's kind of a real quick introduction to what the program is. You then have a copy of all of the paperwork we use for the project. You also have a copy of the tax credit that's specific to DSPD clients. And then you also have a quick intake and eligibility checklist kind of a thing. And that's a real quick eligibility kind of reference sheet for people for DSPD. So if you have clients that you think might be eligible, this could give you kind of a reference to see in terms of their eligibility or diagnosis. Feel free to copy it, feel free to use it, and we'll kind of talk about how you can check if somebody's on the DSPD waiting list a little bit later. So if you have any questions about the stuff in your packet, let me know. Really, the objective of this program is overall to develop collaborative working relationships. And I think in a lot of ways we've done that. I probably instant message Fernando on a daily basis for one reason or another. And he's always really quick to respond, or Laura, whomever. And so hopefully you understanding more about this program too, we can have even more collaboration. And the other goal is to really provide seamless support for supported employment. So having that transition perfectly from voc rehab to DSPD without any interruption in that person's support needs. We also want to talk about just the different roles that people have in this program. That includes the community service brokers. My role as the program administrator, you guys know your role as counselors, and then the supported employment provider. So those last two we're going to quickly touch on because you know your roles really well. I just am hoping that you'll have a great understanding of what the service brokers are doing, why they're calling and bugging you, sometimes why they might demand information that isn't necessarily appropriate. That's happened. So just to give you kind of an awareness about what's going on with the program. We have a couple layers, as all committees and things do. We have an executive management team, which consists of representatives from voc rehab and DSPD, as well as stakeholders. So we have some provider representatives, we have Legislative Coalition for People with Disabilities. It's a pretty big group that gets together and we kind of talk about what's going on with the program, numbers, challenges, solutions, things like that. So here's a list of everybody that's on that team, the executive management team. And then additionally, we have our data people. So Stacy Cummings for VR, and Tyler Black is our data guy with DSPD. And then Jolene Weiler with the benefits planning program, as you guys all know, is so important, is also on this committee. So she kind of brings issues around and around benefits planning. We've done some data matches with her. For people who are in the project to see if they've had benefits planning, that sort of a thing. So we're really trying to make sure we cover all of the facets that would affect a person's life. I then have the list of the committee members. So Fernando represents your area here in the South Valley District, and so then you can see who are the other district representatives. So I won't really touch on that one. And have you guys heard about House Bill 45? Before? Has anybody? I know several of you have been involved in it in the past. We had originally it was House Bill 31 when it was a pilot project, and that was in 2006, and then in 2008 it became a long-term program with a 5-year sunset, and that was named House Bill 45. And then we came up with the SWE, or SWI, I don't like to call it SWE, but the SWI program, Support Work Independence. So that's typically why I'll kind of refer to it as both as House Bill 45/SWI, or the other way around. So that was in 2008. Sadly, in 2009, DSPD lost all of their general state funding for all programs because of legislative cuts. And so we discontinued that in like December of 2009, actually. And so we had all these people, I think we had like 130 people that were employed, we were supporting, and we had to drop the funding. It was horrible, really, really horrible. In 2011, so I guess in this session of 2010, but for fiscal year 2011, Representative Manlove managed to get $150,000 of one-time money in the DSPD budget. And so that was this last year. And I think it was kind of tough. People, got attached to that one-time money, knowing what happened before. And, just kind of how much it takes to get a program going again. So I think we finished the year with about 70 participation agreements. The goal was being 100. Not all of those people were employed, obviously. But I think inside of all of those things, we did okay last year. So now, with this new year, 2012, she added an additional $100,000. So we have $250,000 total to fund more people on the waiting list. And then she wrote the Employment First Priority Bill to actually protect the House Bill 45 money. So she wrote a bill to protect money for a bill. Does that make sense? And it's actually much more than that, but so the money is protected, so we know that it's going to be long-term. And so I think I'm already getting lots of calls, and people are kind of catching on that, oh, this is something that I want to participate in. So that's really, really exciting. And what this means for you as VR counselors is you get to spend your supported employment budget. I don't know specifically what that title money is called.
It's our revenue 71? 71.
Okay. And Dawn, and originally that was the real focus of this project, was to be able for VR to spend this money, because I guess historically we spent a lot. Turning money back, and so now, it's kind of one of those situations where we want you to spend it, right? And I'm like the only person in DSPD that has money that we want to spend too, so it's kind of a little miracle situation going on, I think. So what we've done this year is, last year we kind of had people in the regions overseeing the program. It just wasn't working. We've taken huge cuts within staff at DSPD. And so it's now all centralized, and I do all of it. I do the referrals, I do send out the letters, I'm managing all of the stuff. So if you have any questions, it comes through me. All the paperwork's coming to me. I know that sounds, arrogant maybe isn't the right word. It makes me kind of anxious every time I say it, but capacity-wise, it was really the only choice that we had. So what we have done is we use the community service brokers, and that's a service that we pay for, DSPD pays for, out of this House Bill money to provide some case management, in addition to going out, meeting with the person, explaining the program, getting the paperwork back to me, so then I can then let VR counselors know that this person's participating. So they're kind of serving as a bigger role now, which is maybe why some of you have been getting some odd calls and you're not sure why they want all this information. It's because I am needing them to do some of that stuff for me so that I can administer the program statewide. So with that $250,000, the average is still around $1,500 per person, and that includes the community service broker piece. So probably that's going to go up a little bit, but we're just basing it on a case-by-case basis. We've spent a lot more on some folks, we've spent less on some folks. It really just depends. And that's the beauty of this program, is that we have some flexibility with that, within reason. Obviously, if somebody is never going to be able to achieve a level of independence, we'll need to look at whether they're appropriate for this program or not, just because of the limited amount of funds. But we do have some flexibility within that. So the role of the implementation team, so Fernando and his counterparts in the other offices, is to, coordinate with management, with supervisors, be a technical assistance resource. So if you have questions about the case, or what do you do with that Form 58? Does it have to be green or not? That question came up a while ago. It does not have to be green. P.S.
I missed the salary grant.
I know. Again, that was a budget cut thing. It was like, really? We have to buy that special paper? And anyway, so the form does not have to be green. And so he's really here just to help you answer questions and be a resource. I've had him be a resource if somebody is being referred to the program and they haven't been to Voc Rehab yet. I'll kind of list his information as the contact person so he can kind of help them navigate through the best way, that kind of a thing. So, and then I kind of listed the things that I'm responsible for as the program administrator. I'm sending letters to participants on a quarterly basis. Hopefully, we are going to be doing data matches. So looking at VR caseloads and DSPD waiting list and matching those and making sure we're reaching people. Because you don't always know if somebody's on the waiting list. When people are on that waiting list, they're not typically saying, hey, I'm on the DSPD waiting list, because it doesn't mean a lot to them. They just know they're sitting there. So it's a way for us to identify people who may not be aware of the program. And so we're going to be doing another one of those soon. And so I send those letters out as soon as we get that information back. They send it back to me saying whether they want to participate or not, and then a referral is generated. And then as soon as I get back that participation paperwork, I then send you, the counselor, a Form 58. So that lets you know this person's going to participate, they've committed, they've signed the agreement, that sort of a thing. I've been sending all of the paperwork with that Form 58, so you have their agreement and all that kind of stuff. So the role of the community service brokers, I talked a little bit about that they're doing somewhat of a case management piece. So initially they get this referral about this person. They get their name, their address, basic information about their disability, who their VR counselor is, if I know if they're working with a CRP, a rehab provider. That information is included. They go out, they explain the program. They're also still supposed to look at resources that could be helpful to them. If they haven't signed up for Medicaid, if they are having issues with their Social Security, getting them to a benefits planner. So they're not just going out to fill out the paperwork. They should be able to help with some resources and supports that could be a barrier to someone's employment. Helping them fill out e-pass applications, things like that. So they can be a resource to you as counselors as well. You know, if you're paying a job coach or you're paying additional money for those kinds of things, this is something that could benefit somebody who's in this program, and you as well. Some of the brokers are new to this field. They've had experience not necessarily with Voc Rehab, so if you're getting some weird questions or have some concerns, please call me so I can get them steered in the right direction. I had a call from a parent the other day who said, is it true that if I sign this paper I can never be on the waiting list again? And I said, no, that's not the case. So she was just taking some of the questions or the statements on that participation agreement literally, and this mother was really scared. So, I mean, it really was a matter of just perception and those sorts of things. So again, if you have any issues, let me know. Again, just think of them as a resource to you. And if you are having issues with them, please call me, because they really are supposed to be a support, not somebody who hinders the process or makes you crazy. How's that?
That's fair.
All right. I won't go into your details as counselors other than I've heard some issues that it's been a little tricky with the milestone changes as far as provider changes or switching over to supported employment. Kyle, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, under the old program with the hourly, it was a little bit easier to know when somebody had dropped below 20% of intervention time. Now, we're hoping that we're transitioning over to whatever provider change or anything else that needs to happen with DSPD before, right about the time we're being billed for the milestone for the 20%. That's about when we need to be facilitating that change.
Okay. Do you guys have any questions about that as it come up, as far as when we do that?
So to clarify, Kyle, After they bill for 20% intervention, does that mean that VR doesn't pay the milestone 4?
No, we would still finish our
Okay,
milestones
And that's where I
out.
think counselors are confused.
We still finish our milestones out, but what we need to be doing is working to connect them with DSPD and whoever's going to continue those services so that.
And I think that's where counselors get confused. And I was talking to Tricia, the amount of money that they have is really limited. I think you said they're on the waiting list, they have like 14 hours or something a month, and if they're on DSPD, it's even less than that? Or?
The average is about 4 hours a month, which was kind of figured at that 20% intervention level. You know, if they're going in an hour a week and the person's working, you know, whatever hours, it seems like a lot of these folks are working 10 hours, sometimes less, but you know, that intervention level is around that time, is around that amount of time. We can go up a little bit if somebody needs a little bit more, you know, for a little bit longer, that's fine. But that's kind of where the goal is that 4 hours per month. So it is very limited as far as.
So VR is very critical for DSPD people. Because they have long-term funding does not mean that, you know, we don't have a role long-term in their life. We do. But if it just needs a little bit of tweaking, DSPD is going to be able to do that. But it's likely that these clients will, you know, come back through our agency again, that we're not just dropping them off to DSPD. We're going to be involved with their case over their lifetime, likely. Hopefully we can salvage a job. Sometimes like 5 years later, there's a change in management. Need somebody just to go in and coordinate and collaborate. DSPD, perfect. But if they need more than that, they're going to be back into VR, and we're going to start Milestone and working with those individuals again. And that's why we have our SE money,
Right.
which we want to spend. It's in the budget, and we do want to spend it.
And it's there, and the other piece is, depending on the reauthorization of the Rehab Act, they're even looking at extending our support longer, so just anticipate that happening.
Well, and that brings up a point, because I get this question all the time when counselors have clients that are already, they have a job and they already have the funding, DSPD funding, whether or not they should be eligible for our program or not. That's a question that comes up. And so, you know, that's something I think that counselors need to be working out with and talking, having that communication with you, especially if they're on the waiting list and they don't have the full funding. Because eligibility is going to be, if they're on Social Security, then they're going to be eligible for our program. So we need to work together to share the funding and the hours. So.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. But I know there's been a couple cases of DSPD full funding, for the lack of better word, to distinguish those between the waiting list and those that are on the waiver. Typically, folks on the waiver have a lot more hours that are in their budget or attached to them. It seems like there's been a couple cases that they've already got a job, and then they've come to VR, and with the milestone, it's kind of like, well, you're not going to get the referral fee, and you're not going to get the placement fee, you know. So it's kind of just, and so I need to do some education with support coordinators too, that they need to be working with providers, and I'm not sure why that, because it's been a couple issues I know specifically out of this office, and I'm not sure why that's happening. I think you guys all know that we have privatized support coordination now, so there's been a bit of a disconnect, I think, in terms of what those support coordinators know. There's some new ones. There's, you know, it's been a big change for us too. So I will coordinate some sort of training with Kyle or something specific around that. I mean, my role is to focus on the waiting list employment program, but I want to be a resource for the division as a whole. So.
And what we've done in cases where the client's already working when they come in the door is we've asked the counselor to sit down with the job coach, CRP, the job coach company, and the community service broker, and figure out, okay, in terms of our milestones, what's most appropriate for us to authorize. And usually it's just, you know, we skip the referral. We're changing the name of that starting October 1. But we skip that, and we skip the placement fee, but then we move into the 20% and those others. So that is within a counselor's discretion to sit down and really figure out what's most appropriate.
And that's where I think, as VR counselors, that with the brokers being new, some of them being new, that it's really we need to educate them too. And, you know, we want the best interest for the client. And bringing that team in together is really the only way that we can all kind of come onto the same page and have an understanding what our responsibilities are, theirs, and what's appropriate. So that communication is really, really important for that full team to come together.
It is, absolutely. So ideally, the cycle of a case would be you have somebody, they get identified, a broker goes out and meets with them, they get the paperwork back to me, I send you a Form 58, and then when you get ready for that 90-day closure, you send it back to me, and it says when the case is going to be closed. I then put a note for myself that that's when that person's budget will start. I see a possibility, I'm not anticipating it, but I see a possibility with the milestone where they kind of get that 20% milestone payment for them as soon as they get that 90-day letter to say, oh, we need DSPD money, when they still have some time left before the case closes. So I'd really like to know when the actual close date is so that I'm not paying for services prior to. Do you know what I'm saying? Okay. I've had a couple where I'm like, wait a minute, you said you needed it now, but the Form 58 says the case isn't closed until November. And so I've said, hey, I confirmed with the counselor. Oh, okay. So it just kind of made me aware that that could be a potential issue. So it's helpful for me to know the actual closure date on those Form 58s.
I have a copy of the Form 58. I'm going to pass these around too. So you guys can have those in your packet. But those can be generated from either end. That's really a back and forth kind of form that doesn't necessarily have to come from Tricia initially.
Right.
As you're meeting with your clients and you identify them to be on the waiting list for DSPD, that you can shoot this over to her. And we really want to educate the clients too. If they're not, if they haven't applied, then we want to encourage them to look at that resource if you like.
It is. Yeah, and you can email me, instant message me, hey, is this person on the list? I can check, if I'm sitting at my desk, I can check really quickly to see if they are on the waiting list, or if they're in full DSPD services, I can let you know who the support coordinator is, who that company owner is. We have a really great database that I can do that quickly. And we have, I know we have a memorandum of understanding for the House bill. Maybe when we do that, when we update it, we could maybe add something so that we're making sure, data sharing wise, we can do that. Yeah.
Does Fernando have access to that information as well for our district?
He doesn't have, not for the database, but he can always just check with me as anybody else can. That seems to have been the quickest. I mean, you can use the Form 58 to check and see, but I can also just check informally.
And I can also,
Everyone has access.
Mhm.
Is it easier for you to have one central person kind of do that rather than getting all those emails?
Not necessarily.
So I think for, like with Tricia, she's one person doing a heck of a lot. I mean, it's amazing to me what all you do. And so all that we can do to help in that process, that she doesn't have to generate all this information.
I just want you guys to be able to spend that, you know what I mean? If you don't know somebody's eligible for DSPD and you could use that supported employment money, that's a shame to me. And I know that there's several that have probably gone through and we didn't know or we didn't identify in time. So I'd like to avoid that happening. So you had a question?
Yeah, just a quick question on our Form 58 here. So you're saying you'd like to have this sent back to you in conjunction with the 90-day letter.
Mm-hmm.
So who do we need to contact to maybe change that? Because it says for us to return to the referring agency at closure.
On the 48?
On the Form 58. I never even noticed that it said that.
Yes, under Part 2, it says results of referral to DRS.
Yeah, we can change that.
That should help.
Okay.
90 day in there.
Okay, yeah, because if you're not in the, because, in our instructions within the training, we say, at 90, when you note the 90-day closure letter period. But the form, I didn't even notice that the form said that, so thank you. And even for traditional DSPD cases or fully funded, that would be good because then they can get their budget set up too or any changes they need to make. So I won't go over each of the forms. You have a copy of each of those and who's responsible for filling those out. And then, just some of the support resources. I've included the information about the TC40HD, which is the state tax credit for people who are on the waiting list for DSPD or in services. So I've promoted this to job coaches, to service brokers as another tax incentive to offer employers for people in this program. I just have to be the one that signs that form that the employers send in, just to certify that they are in fact on the DSPD waiting list or in services. So that's just an added benefit to the WOTC credit. We do have something that I kind of bring up is the coworker support that DSPD has. I want to say it's similar to your OJT, but it's not. I don't think it's designed as well, personally. It's set up similarly though. The employer would be paid up to this $4.44 per hour to kind of offset support that an employee might be giving that coworker with a disability. The challenge is that it has to go through a provider. So one of the CRPs, they have to be the one to pay the employer. And there haven't been anybody that are interested in doing that because there's not an administrative piece built into that. So there's some flaws. I'm hoping with the Employment First legislation that we can fix that so it's actually a service that's get used. But we do have it. There might be a couple situations where it makes the most sense. If somebody works at a daycare, a lot of times the job coach isn't necessarily appropriate in those kinds of settings. They want to be the ones that train or something like that. Small businesses, I can see it working.
Is it the coworker that gets that money then, that's doing the actual training?
The employer has the discretion of how they want to do that. I mean, they could pay that coworker more money, or they could just use it to offset the additional staff that might need to support that person. They have the discretion of how they want to use it. Does that make sense? So anyway, just letting you know it's there. If you have somebody that it makes sense for, we could see what we could work out. It just hasn't been very popular. I'll just say that. So a couple clarifications. The community service brokers can be used at any time in the process. Typically, they might be a little more involved up front when the person just gets going. But if there's an issue, they can be called on to resolve something. That's something that we can use the money for. Just people can unenroll from the program anytime if they don't want to continue to participate. We're, again, being consistent with your notions of employment being or not being temporary, things like that. The employment needs to be at least minimum wage, all those kinds of things that are the rules that you have around employment. So again, I think we've identified some of the challenges that we have: collaborating, problem solving, asking questions, just keeping that line of communication open. It seems like that's always the biggest challenge. You get the information, and then unless you have somebody, you kind of forget about it. So, if you have any questions, go to Fernando or myself or Kyle if you can catch him.